Hey, everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. We are going to be talking about this book, Stacked.
All
Do-
right.
we have Dr. Karen Gurney here. So, welcome.
Thank you.
I have to tell you, it's an unusual title because I was thinking, like, what are people going to think when I'm carrying around this title?
Yeah, there are some other connotations. I did
Yes.
look that up, but it definitely fit in with the theme of the book, which is what we're going to talk about today, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
stacking your
Keyword stacking.
keywords. Okay, so what surprised me so much is how the landscape of job search has changed so much over the last, I don't know, is it probably in the last decade or I'm not even sure. But it seems like the whole process for finding a job has changed. And so for those who are out there who maybe the last time they got a job was like 10 years ago, it's probably changed pretty dramatically. So I thought we'd start there to kind of contrast like where is the job search? How's it changed over time? Because in the past, when I was younger, I would go through and you basically fill out a resume, you send the resume into the company gets back to you, you get called in for an interview, and then hopefully you get the job. But it's now and then like there started to be these ideas of headhunters that were out there that were pulling you in. When I was at Microsoft, I would get called all the time by these people who were like, "Are you interested in changing your job?" I'm like, "No. How did you get my name? Who are you? What are you calling me for?" So, and that was kind of the beginning of headhunters. And now there are other changes. So I figured you could tell us like what how the landscape has changed.
Well, the internet obviously came around, right around 2000.
Yeah.
And we started seeing companies like Monster and the online job boards that took over newspaper job ads.
Right.
But in 2007, what really changed the game was that employers started installing these applicant tracking systems or talent management systems
Mm-hmm.
that would do an electronic screen of the resumes. And the
Hmm.
problem is that created the resume black hole. This is probably one of the biggest sources of
Mm.
frustration for candidates. And then on the employer side, though, when employers are surveyed, they said 50% of the time they can't find qualified talent inside of their applicant tracking system. And one president was so frustrated of this company that he couldn't find talent in his system that he actually searched for himself for his own job and he was not produced as a candidate. So the applicant tracking systems have really changed the game. The
Right.
other thing that changed the game is with Monster and some of the other, because now we have new ones that are much more important. They do quick applies. And there was a period in time where you could literally shoot your resume out to 50 jobs at one time. So they were getting a lot of low quality resumes. And that's
Mm.
when they really started leaning on the applicant tracking system. And when you speak about recruiting, which I'm very specific in the book about headhunting because even though we're using headhunters in the term that's probably appropriate for them, that it's a recruiter, a lot of candidates have this hopeful notion that there's someone out there that they can hire that will call and find jobs for them.
Right.
And that's why I really avoid using the term headhunter, only because of the connotation that people have with it,
Right.
that they think they can hire an agent, a job agent, or that if they meet a recruiter, that recruiter is going to help them make them be a fit. And
Right.
that's the problem is recruiters are actually looking for people for their open jobs. They're serving either their internal department or their company, and they're not trying to make anyone be a fit. They're going for the person that's a fit.
Right. And that's
So
actually a key distinction that I think I literally have to read that sentence two or three times where you're hoping like I'm looking for a company that's a fit for me, versus you're saying the recruiter is looking for, people that fit the job. It's a fundamentally different lens that they're looking at. And I think that was like a little light bulb went off going, oh, I get it. Okay. So, and it's just like in real estate, right? When you're selling a place, you're like, oh, this realtor is really trying to help me, basically find a house for me. It's like, yeah, yeah, sort of. They're mostly trying to find a buyer for a house. That's what they're looking for.
yes, yes.
Very, very kind of similar type of dynamic. And so this applicant tracking system, is it still being, it seems like it's still being used even though it's wholly ineffective.
It's becoming even more used. So electronic screening is even more important. And what's funny is that's actually increasing third-party recruiters, the
Oh
industry,
God, that just
because
seems crazy.
I know. So they have these a third-party recruiter makes about 25% commission off
Hmm.
of the first year hiring salary. So if
Right,
someone makes $100,000 per year, the recruiter is going to make 25,000. So it's a pretty hefty commission,
right.
but when they hire that person, they're usually looking for what we call a unicorn in the industry. And this kind of frustrates candidates because there are still recruiters very much calling into companies like Microsoft looking to what we call poach.
Hmm.
They're trying to take someone that another company developed you and
Right,
they're going to rip you from that company
right.
and try and install you somewhere else. In fact, when I work with the third party recruiters that I source for, it's 100 agencies across the United States. And they actually prefer to actually call into companies still.
Wow.
They're,
For
yeah,
existing
versus
employees that are not even that are happy, they're not even looking around. They still would rather
that's
call them.
right.
Mm,
Just because they've got to find they're being paid for the unicorn.
right. Okay, so here's the weird thing. So there's this ineffective system, the application tracking system, that more and more
Yes.
people are going to, even though it doesn't. It basically is, like you said, trying to find a unicorn. Which when people use that term for people who aren't familiar, that's like I want to have. It's like marrying the perfect woman. Like you're looking for someone who's like a Barbie doll, which first of all that doesn't exist. No one has those. That 36, 24, 36 measurement, blonde hair, genius on her essay, genius, went to an Ivy League school. Like these things are just ridiculous. That's the unicorn. Is that what you're referring to as a unicorn?
Yeah, I'd like to give you an example because sometimes the unicorn is surprising.
Uh
So
huh.
I was just sourcing for 43 production supervisors across 50, or 5 states, excuse me.
Right.
And the employer likes to hire three types of people, and
Okay.
it's very precise. So they want someone who is about to leave the military that has 4 to 8 years of service and has
Okay.
platoon leadership,
Okay.
or they want someone who left the military and their first job out of the military was a production supervisor and they only have 1 to 2 years in post military,
Wow. Okay.
or they want a new graduate that has 1 to 2 years production supervisor. That's it. That's it. So
That is a unicorn.
it's a very unique unicorn. It's not what you would expect. Like you would think a unicorn should be someone who has 25 years or maybe 10 years without moving anywhere. For them, the unicorn is someone who has shown the intent to work as a production supervisor, has shown they have leadership skills, and has shown they want to work in a manufacturing environment and they can develop them over time. They're young.
Right. Wow. Okay. Got it. So the application tracking system then for this company, had they not hired you to hire all these production supervisors, they would be reliant on this application tracking system to screen through. And how does that system even work? Since the vast majority of people use that as their primary means, even though it doesn't work well. What is it? What? How
Well,
does it
this
work?
is this is the best example because think about what they would have to put into their system. So the same thing they search for is what I would go onto Indeed, LinkedIn, Monster are examples, okay?
Right.
I'm going to search as well for someone who meets that criteria. The problem is in their applicant tracking system, in this case, they're not going to produce people with that criteria. I mean, they could type in military, they could type production supervisor. The likelihood of them producing that exact mix is really low. So
Hmm.
from their perspective, they're like, oh, there's no candidates in my database.
Oh
That's
wow.
probably not true. They probably have 3,000 production supervisors in their database, but they
Wow.
have something very specific they're looking for. And that's when they start going and paying big commissions to recruiters.
Right. Which is what you are. Like you're hired as a recruiter for this one place to do production agents, find this production supervisor.
And this is actually fun too, is there's in recruiting industry, there's two types in third party recruiting.
Okay.
There's placers and sourcers. It sounds like Harry Potter.
Yeah, okay. But you're a sorcerer. Not a
I'm a sorcerer.
sorcerer, but you're a
Yeah.
sorcerer. Okay, what does a sorcerer do versus a placer?
A placer actually gets the contract. They don't look for the candidates. So they call into companies, they develop a relationship. They say, "Hey, do you have any difficult to find employees or
Yeah.
people that you're hiring?" They'll get the contract, they'll sign it, and then they rely on sourcers a lot of the times because they don't want to go through the candidates. They don't want to make the telephone calls.
Oh my
So they want
gosh.
to get agreements. Yeah. Some people do both, and a lot of people do one or the other.
Okay, so are you working so as a sourcer, you could either be working directly for a company or working for a placer. Is that right?
I could become a placer and a sourcer,
Right.
or I can be a sourcer to placers. So
I
it's
get
kind
it.
of,
Actually, I do get it. Okay, got it. Interesting.
but then, there's the whole other aspect of the business where we have internal HR,
Right.
but they still have the same job. They're just serving the internal candidate. They have a slightly different perspective.
Right.
So the third party recruiters are trying to screen you in. They're trying to
Mhm.
find their commission.
Right.
Well, so they'll talk to a lot of people. They'll pick up the phone. I love third party recruiters because they're ready to talk. They do recruit in the old fashioned way. I mean,
Right.
they're on the phone 24/7. Well, HR is like, I'm going to let my applicant tracking system screen out 3,000 candidates, produce 10 that meet my search requirement. So I only have to look at those 10. And of those 10, I'm only going to call three.
Wow. Okay.
So they have a whittled down perspective while the recruiter is also whittling down, but the third party recruiter wants to make calls.
Right. Okay. But are you, as a sourcer, are you the same as a third party recruiter? Is that the same term?
It is. It's
Okay.
just that my role in the third party recruiting industry is sourcing.
Okay, got versus a placer. Okay, I get it now. Okay, so when so let's say that I'm an internal person. I work in HR within Microsoft, and I'm using my application tracking system, and I find the
Yes.
three out of the whatever. Then what am I when I find those three? What data am I looking at? Where am I getting this data? What is it? Because I know, like in LinkedIn, you're getting the data from LinkedIn. You can see their LinkedIn profile. What's the data on the applicant tracking system?
Well, on the applicant tracking system, it's a database. It actually functions the same way as Indeed and LinkedIn. It's a database of candidates. The only difference is it receives a lot less investment. So once it's installed, if you think about how much money Google invested in its artificial intelligence to understand what you're searching for,
Mm-hmm.
Indeed and LinkedIn gets a lot more investment. These applicant tracking systems, they install it and it's done. So that's one of the reasons it's kind of clunky. It's
Right.
not,
The search algorithms aren't good in that.
yes, it's
Okay.
not as
But
good.
what is the input? Is it inputting like every applicant that ever sent in their resume and it's just putting that into the application? What is the data that's stored in the applicant training system, tracking
It will
system?
be, it actually scrapes their resume and inputs it into fields if the candidate didn't do it. And that could be over time. In most applicant tracking systems, you can select, I want someone who's currently or who applied to me in the past 3 months, or maybe they are willing to look, hey, it was 2 years ago. I mean, this is a free database, so they may be willing to really
Mm.
look at candidates that came to them a long time ago, and then, or they're going to advertise, and then it'll come into their applicant tracking system. These are fresh people that just applied.
Okay, got it. So like when I actually go and I say, okay, I'm applying, I see the whatever Microsoft has an advertisement. I apply, send my resume in, then it scrapes the data off of that. It like somehow like scrapes the data and then puts it into its database. Whether that's a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, that's the source of the data. Anytime I have directly contacted that company, but it's really hard to be found because it's like doing all these weird search algorithms that may not like it depends on whether you put that on your resume or not. Like maybe you did work as a production manager and you didn't include it on your resume and you fit all the other criteria, then you would just not even show up because you just didn't put that on your resume and they're looking for this weird screening criteria.
And what I'd like to tell people is to do a test of their material. Well, there's a variety of tests they can run, but Indeed.com scrapes your resume.
Okay.
So if you want to see how an applicant tracking system may, because there's many
Right.
different types of applicants. So, but this is a version. Now, see, Monster doesn't do this, and LinkedIn doesn't do it either, but Indeed does. So this is a good first sign of what your resume looks like when it gets pulled into these systems.
Right.
The other thing is that you can't use a PDF because the systems can't read it. I mean, Word is really the gold standard in the industry. You don't want lines across the page because they'll end up in the out bin. You want to maintain some type of margins. You don't want to use weird characters. There's a lot of things that, if you think about programming, will affect the performance of that resume. So you want very plain Jane text-based resumes.
Right. And then you see what happens when a system like this application tracking system scrapes it. So you can use Indeed as a surrogate to see, like, okay, when I send my resume into, let's say, Microsoft responding to an ad, this is what it's going to look like in their system. And it could be like, oh my God, no one's going to want to look at me because I've got all these weird lines and can't even read my data. So they're just going to throw my resume out because I'm irritating them from the get go. And it had nothing to do with me. Then I had this beautiful formatted thing that a graphic designer created, and it doesn't work at all. It's great.
That's right, the
Wow.
graphic designer ones, and it won't even surface. I mean, it you really won't even be produced as a candidate if you're using that type of resume. And then the other thing that I was going to say is kind of an exciting innovation
Yeah.
that will come out. I plan on updating the book annually because
Yeah.
I learned something and apply new systems. You can also search resumes. Anyone can search resumes on Indeed for free.
Wow.
So if you want to understand how well, like let's say I want to become, I'm working on someone who's doing director of customer care, like workforce management, IVR, call center metrics.
Hmm.
I'm going to load up his stuff, get it all optimized, and then I'm going to test it. I'm going to search for his resume and make sure that he's being produced as a top candidate for the right search terms.
Right. Because you're a third party recruiter, like every third party recruiter is going to do what I'm doing. So if I go in and enter in his optimized LinkedIn profile or Indeed profile or is there a Monster Board profile too? If I can't find him, then other third party recruiters are also not going to find them.
Exactly right.
Okay. And do you also, then I can see doing all sorts of things. Then you could actually look at it and say, well, here's who I did find. And then kind of look and do a competitive analysis. Like, why is it that I
I
found this
love
person?
that.
Do you do that too?
That's well, not even just that, CJ, but I will use their content.
Oh,
Like if I find, I mean,
just plagiarize their content. I mean, if it's, do you know what I mean? Because you literally can do that. You can say, well, that my client has done that too. So I'm going to have to do like a match so that it doesn't look like when I'm comparing my client against this client that this client has a little bit more. This potential applicant has more than my
and
resume.
it's highly unlikely to ever match. So you have different companies, different dates. So I typically in the book, I teach people to actually use the job advertisement to create a direct hit match look.
Right.
But the point is also you can do this test. And if you really want to understand what does a resume look like for someone who is a training and development officer for a large Fortune 500 company, you can do that. Or you can go on LinkedIn and find their profiles as well.
Right. And then kind of do a match, assuming that. So the matcho is there's an HR person is going to put up a job description and what they're looking for. So it's a match against that, which may or may not be a match against who the existing person is in that job. But you're saying you're trying to increase the odds. So look at that's what I'm hearing, right? Look at the job description that's on the job posting. Look at the people who are in the existing job and try to do an amalgamation of those two and put that in your resume.
That's right.
Well, are your resumes must be like 10 pages now because like in order to stack them to do this, do people care if your resume is like 10 pages? Because you'd have to put so much,
No,
right?
my resumes do not exceed 2 pages.
Really?
Yes.
Even though you're
And
trying to like
sometimes they're only one.
load. Okay, so how do you do that? Because if you're trying to load them up with all stack them, so you're trying to stack them with all the
Keyword stack, keyword
keywords,
stack.
keyword stacks. How do you do that? First of all, how do you make it legible so that it's not just like, when in the very early days of search engine optimization, people would be like, I'm a life coach in Seattle because life coaching in Seattle is important to me because I'm one of the premier life coaches in Seattle. And you're like, does this person not know how to write? Like, what is wrong with them? How do you do that in your resume so that it's like you're not stacking to the point that it's like illegible to the person who is reading the actual
Right. It's not,
resume?
although there is a point system for the amount of times keywords are used, that's not necessarily that way. It's that it has to be present, your keywords have to exist,
Hmm.
and where we put them. So on the resume, you create a title bar, and the title bar actually duplicates the title, the common title that you're going for.
Hmm.
So a resume is a campaign. This is one of the things I teach in the book. It's a
Right.
marketing campaign. And we have to find a profile of jobs, like let's say with my management workforce person, I found 30 jobs this morning that
Mm-hmm.
match,
Mm-hmm.
and they all have very similar titles. There's some small differences. I go through the job ads, I find what's common, what are the technologies they're asking for, what are the skills they want to see, like service level agreements, ITIL certifications, whatever it is.
Uh,
And then I create first the title bar, which is duplicating the title, then the summary of skills, which is taking the mandatory qualifications and rewriting them at the top of the resume. And I have literally had recruiters call my candidates and read that line to them. Your
wow.
resume says you have this. Yes.
Wow.
Resume, I mean, if you recruiters, and when they say the 5 second scan, that's no joke.
Yeah.
They once they are narrowing down, like if they talk on the phone and the person says, "Oh yeah, I'm interested," and they're like, "Okay, yeah, this looks like a match," then they'll start really honing down and looking at that resume. But for the first reach out contact, they're looking for some basic, like I just told you with the production supervisor. I'm doing a 5 second scan. I'm looking, do they job jump? Are they young? Do they have production supervisor title? Do they have military? It's quick, boom. And then then I'll reach out to them because you never know if they're even interested.
Right.
And they'll say, "Oh yeah, I'm interested." And then I really got to look at that thing before I introduce it to my client.
I see. So you're doing all that screening beforehand. Hopefully the
Yes.
client, hopefully the person has put the appropriate information into LinkedIn so that you can even find them. And that's what you're saying this book is about, like put it in because people like me can't find you unless you put it in. Okay, got it. And do some research. So it seems like you need to know the job title that you want to go for. You need to know that do you need to know the industry that you want to go for?
No. So in the core three, I
Yeah.
have a set of about 10 to 20 criteria that people need to list out and do different searches for.
Right.
And sometimes industry is important and sometimes it's not. So for instance, a production supervisor, we know that's going to be manufacturing,
Right.
right? But for someone who's maybe a controller, maybe industry is not that important for this type of finance role.
Right. Right.
Sometimes industry is more important than other times. So I usually have people focus on software because that ends up being a very important keyword search and it can open up a lot of different career changes for most
Mm.
candidates.
Mhm. Mhm. You're saying
So
literally putting the word software in the
I literally put the title, this workforce management, we probably have 10 pieces of software listed. So we have the title, the summary of skills, and then we have the skill highlights.
yes.
Then we repeat it later in our sentences.
Right.
I used Avaya to develop this call center metric, and it's more conversational.
Right. Okay,
So
got it.
first, the recruiter's like, "Oh my gosh, this is my marriage made in heaven. This is a direct hit match on the first quarter. It's very similar to website development. It's the top of the fold. You want to capture their attention immediately."
Right.
Then they're going to look down and say, "Okay, where did they do this work? What's their tenure in that job? What's their title? What's their rank?"
Right.
And then we're going to look at their actual accomplishments. But first, we have to be produced as a candidate, and that's where the keyword stacking comes in.
Wow. Okay, got it. So, you have okay. Wow, this is just so fascinating. Okay, so I think I get it. So I understand how the resume just finally gets in, and then the whole idea is to know. You said there's in your book, and there's videos on the three. What do you call them again? I can't remember what you
The
call them.
core three.
The core three. So those
They're
are the
your
things.
power job moves.
Okay, and those are the things that you're like, you have to have these in your actual profile so that people Indeed profile, your LinkedIn. And can you do one profile and put them across all three of them? Or they, because it seems like from reading them, each of them works slightly differently, right?
Yeah. So this is actually something that will probably hit the book next year unless I revise it this year. Something that I'm working on with a lot of candidates. Some people have 2 to 3 power job moves that really are somewhat different.
Right.
And the you can only have one LinkedIn profile at one time. I have run multiples and it's very confusing because LinkedIn is operates in a way that it's supposed to understand like where you're coming from. So it was sending my dummy account, it was sending connections out to my friends. They're like, "What? You're not a controller. You're not fancy, right?" Because I was doing a dummy account for the
Right.
class.
Right.
But if you create multiple email accounts, you can run multiple campaigns for different resumes
Oh
and
my
people.
gosh. Okay, so let me make sure I understand that. So let's say I'm in marketing and I may be interested in a VP of marketing position, or I may be interested in working within an agency, and like my two resumes would be, let's say I want to be I would be interested in working in an agency doing retail work, or yeah, I don't know what it. You know what I mean? Like you're both of them are marketing, but the kind of look is very different. One is kind of working within a corporation doing marketing, and the second is working for a marketing agency, being a principal in a marketing agency and doing marketing. Two different resumes. So you're saying I could create two profiles on LinkedIn, each that is optimized for those two potential job offerings, and then as long as I have a different email that's associated with them, LinkedIn, it's permissible from LinkedIn for me to have these two profiles. I'm not going to get dinged or booted off the system.
Indeed, you're okay. In Monster, okay, not LinkedIn.
Okay, not in LinkedIn, but those others
LinkedIn,
you
you
could do
can,
it. Okay.
yeah, you can do it, CJ, but the problem is that it's with all of your, like, LinkedIn knows how to pull information from you. So it'll start reaching out to it'll try and guess who you know, and it will start sending out reach outs, and it's confusing to the market.
They're like, why do you have two or three profiles each spamming me? What's wrong with you, CJ?
It doesn't work on LinkedIn.
Okay, got. But you could do it for Indeed. So you're literally using your job as a campaign and seeing which ones get more hit. And then you can even, like, I assume, just keep on tweaking to figure out, like, how about if I change this? Am I getting more hits? And how about if I change this variable?
Yes.
Okay, so it's
This
like a
is
direct
another
marketing
innovation.
campaign.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Uh,
have another innovation too. I'm starting to keyword stack the titles.
mm-hmm.
So let's say someone, okay, so my workforce man, well, I'll go with another client. I have a dean. He was a dean of a college business.
Right.
He has worked a lot in labor relations. He basically, for 120 person college, he's managing the union. So he wants to do
Right.
HR. And the other thing he's thinking about doing is major gifts because he was very good at fundraising, and that's part of the dean's job.
Right.
So the problem is the dean title doesn't match any of those, but we don't want to lie about his title. So what I'm doing is I put dean, but in parentheses, I put major gift officer or I put HR director.
Right. That makes
So
sense
that's
because because it's probably scanning for the. I've talked to some other LinkedIn folks, and the same thing. They were saying the same exact thing. Like the title reigns supreme. So whatever you put in that title, all of a sudden, like your whole experience is architected based on what you put on that title. So you got to put major gifts if that's what is his interest is going forward. So you would work with a candidate and saying like, "Oh, I'm interested in major gifts," or you're saying the other thing was
HR.
HR. So you would work with that dean and actually optimizing two different variants. And when you do the when you because you're in your title it says double your job interviews, leverage recruiters, unlock LinkedIn. Do you have a
Mhm.
sense of does it literally double? I assume it's even more than double the amount of. Have you actually done? I assume since you're numbers oriented, what is the actual percentage uptake as a result of stacking?
Uh, well, that's a hard comparison because the person would have to tell me before they come to me as a client what their performance was.
Yeah, no. So you don't
My
know.
my goal for them, when I know, there's a couple things, and this depends on location, it depends on title, although there's some commonalities.
Right.
I want to create a profile that has a professional association with it. So with, like, for instance, I have to talk about finance and accounting because it's so easy. But I'm going to try to explain this because, okay, here's a good example. I had a candidate that was a controller, but she actually wanted to do forecasting. This is what's in the book. She
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do forecasting or financial planning and analysis. It's FP&A is actually a
Mm-hmm.
title. If I put her as controller and someone is searching for FP&A, they're never going to find her.
Right.
So I have two choices, and this is another thing where someone has to make a decision. We can do controller and put in parentheses FP&A, or I can have her let the system, LinkedIn, auto-generate forecasting, planning, and analysis as the title, because LinkedIn and Indeed are not binding applications.
Hmm.
So you're gaming the system to be produced, but when you actually do the formal application, you're going to have to put your title.
I see,
See what I'm
right. So I
saying?
can actually put down the title. I can just make up a title just so that it actually shows up within LinkedIn as like the title that
Yes.
everything is generated off of. Okay, got it. And it's, I mean, I assume that she's been doing that work, so it's not a lie. It's just that your
Right.
actual title is controller. I see.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. Okay, got it.
That's really critical because there's no point in really lying if you can't do the job because the moment they call and I have to be honest with you, most candidates are incredibly honest.
Right.
HR is always freaked out that people are lying to them. People do not want to be
Caught. Yeah,
caught
no.
not just in the lie but also being put in a situation where they can't perform.
Yeah.
That really concerns can in fact it sometimes is debilitating for the
Right.
candidate.
Yeah.
And I had a senior level accountant that the work that he was interviewing for, he hadn't done for 10 years, and he killed his interview, even though he's perfectly capable of doing this work.
Yeah.
But he was his own barrier. Like, oh my gosh, I haven't done this in 10 years. You're a senior level accountant. You've had 25 years of accounting experience. You can do this work. I mean, so he killed it himself.
Right. You know, it's funny because I often have the same issues with clients where like, well, should I tell them that I got fired? And I was like, no.
Right.
That usually doesn't go so well when you
There's a
share that.
whole section in the book about managing
I
termination.
know, I know. So I think that people are generally honest. There's like the 1% that's probably just made up a whole bunch of stuff on the guy who's that whole movie was about whatever the guy who made pretended he was a doctor in an airplane.
Yeah.
That's the 1%.
It's
Okay.
very unusual. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if I am approached by a headhunter, like, should I be? It seems like I do want. I actually want you to find me. So right. So is there? Because it seems like you will find me, or should I go find you?
So we're doing both. I have people run the passive search, and I know when things are optimized or when someone's hot, when they get a call, sometimes within 72 hours on the
Right.
passive search.
Right.
I had a candidate who was a demand planner. This is when you're working for a large manufacturer and you're trying to forecast, the amount of units you need.
Yep.
This guy was doing direct applications, which he should. He was out of work. And he was running the passive search that I designed for him. And he stopped doing direct applications because the results from the passive search were so much better. He was getting in-persons, he was getting calls. He wasn't off his direct apps.
Right.
So
And direct
it's
apps means he was directly applying for a particular job in a manufacturing company with this stuff.
yeah, I
Right.
got to tell you about this one. So I wanted her to write it in my endorsement on LinkedIn, but she was like, no, she didn't want someone to read it.
Right.
But I had someone who was director of education for a professional organization.
Hmm.
She had directly applied with the resume into their system. This is the resume I created.
Right.
A third-party recruiter, not the internal HR, called her and said, I found your resume on LinkedIn. She never got called from the company. So
Of
they
course.
paid a
Yeah.
recruiter 25 grand to source her when she had actually directly applied for that job.
I'm sure that's the case. Just like if you said that the guy was looking for, like, he put his resume through and it wasn't hitting, then there's probably a lot of false negatives, right? That system just doesn't pick up whatsoever. So, but like, how does so someone has to find someone like you? How do they even find someone like you? And like, my understanding is like finding a headhunter. There's headhunters that specialize, and I'm sorry, recruiter is probably a more appropriate name, but finding like you, it sounds like you focus on manufacturing jobs. There was a guy that constantly called me from Microsoft that focused on marketing and high tech. How do you find people to say, okay, I want to send you my information? Or do they?
Yeah,
Or do they?
you don't.
You don't. So they
Not
have to
really.
find you.
It's a little bit of a mix, a little bit.
Okay.
So you're trying to optimize the account so you can capture the recruiter that's looking for
I see.
that's the whole goal of the book is actually to capture the recruiters that are out there looking because a lot of these jobs aren't posted.
Okay.
And even if you knew a recruiter that was playing in your,
Sandbox.
ballpark,
Yeah.
they may not have a fit. This is where we have these fit. And it's frustrating to recruiters too. I have to tell you, they're just as frustrated with this part of trying to make this match. So the point is that we're trying to capture low-hanging fruit. There are recruiters out there searching. We want to have the account optimized so that we're produced as a candidate for them. That's the key. There are fields that have agencies that specialize, like tech systems for IT is a national. Robert Half is a national for finance and accounting. Those ones I will, even if there's not a job advertised right now, I will have the candidates submit to those organizations so they're in their database. They probably won't get a call if there's no live job because there's no match for the recruiter right now. They're trying to get their commissions. They're going for the match.
Right, I
But
see.
yeah,
Okay, I've had the couple situations where someone would say, "Oh yeah, I knew someone like if you're looking for a job, I know someone who used to do headhunting at Microsoft for marketing people. So go talk to like John Smith." And so me going to go, "Oh, well, I'm interested in working. I know you helped my friend Sally. John, would you help me?" And John would be like, if I have the job with that criteria, great. But like John's not really that incented to even meet me, potentially because I may fill one of his things. Or you're saying he's not incented at all to meet me?
usually not. There are, but see, this is actually the negative side, the dark side of recruiting.
Yes.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes the third party recruiters like Robert Half or Tech Systems will meet to develop their database. They have no job. They're just meeting to see if they like you for some future potential.
Oh,
But that leaves a negative, and this is why I write so much in the book about it. It leaves a lot of candidates feel victimized by third party recruiters because once again, they're looking for that hit. They're looking for that direct hit match for their client. It's not that they don't care about you. Actually, these people care about people a lot. It's that they make their money off the commission by finding a direct hit match for the employer.
I see. So
So,
if you're not a direct hit, you mean nothing to me. I mean, I may be interested. You may be a direct hit in the future, so I'll put you in my database.
yes,
But like, if you don't fit the criteria I'm looking for at this moment, of which I'm actively looking at right now, and Indeed and LinkedIn, like it's nice knowing you. Like I like you. You're a nice person, but like, no thanks. That's what I'm hearing from the
yes.
recruiter.
They're not going to
Oh,
call into an employer and say, I have a great candidate. Can you place them? Now, in this group of recruiters, they will say, I have a great, sometimes like I'm a sourcer, and I
right.
do career coaching.
Yes.
So if someone gets outplaced to me, I might say to my 100-person recruiters, hey, I have a candidate that has this in case your client company might be looking. But
Right.
it's a shot in the dark. It's not really how the industry works. This is very frustrating to people.
Yeah, because I don't think you would know that as a job applicant, knowing like, okay, unless you hit these criteria, you like trying to meet with that person is kind of a faulty idea because unless they have a job secured right now that they're looking for, like unless those two paths align, which is very small probability, you'd be better
Yes.
off optimizing your resume for LinkedIn, Indeed, and then like you said, you're going to be coming up with your next book next year with like how you actually optimize for each of them because they're slightly different algorithms
Well,
for each.
that's in the book. The
It
only
is.
difference is I haven't told people about using two different emails to run two different campaigns.
Oh,
I
oh, we got to reveal the tip today. Woohoo!
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I get it. So it seems like basically I can apply to the so here's how I see it as a rundown, right? I can apply directly to the company, but unless I fit their algorithm of who the heck knows what they scraped off my resume, it's just that seems like a really low probability scenario. I can't contact a headhunter because it's just that headhunter doesn't care. I mean, they care, but like whatever. Then the third is networking. That's the only third option that we haven't talked about, which is why don't you start networking with people who work at that manufacturing company and see if you can find a job. How does that stack up against these other means?
So one of the last chapters of the book is actually how to use LinkedIn for networking. I do have a section on in-person networking,
Mm-hmm.
but in-person networking is nowhere near as effective as advanced LinkedIn campaigns.
Okay.
So there's a few ways that I run it, but it's important for the listeners to understand there's a volume thing. So we're optimizing the account for a passive recruiter search. That's
Mm-hmm.
going to get a certain amount of hits. We're optimizing also and applying. So when I get a candidate and I run their campaign, I apply to 10 jobs straight out of the gate. If there's a quick apply option, if there's no quick apply, I send them the link and I said, this is your homework. You have to apply
Mm-hmm.
for these jobs. Don't even look at them, don't read them, just apply. We have to do a certain amount of volume, right? And a lot of times candidates talk themselves out of applying for jobs, and that's killing their ability to get one.
Mm.
So we just do a volume, we get the resume right, we find the right listing of jobs, and then if there's a quick apply option, I'll get it going for them, but then they have to do some direct apps. So now we have this bulk out there. We've got recruiters that can find you, we've got the quick applies, and then we've got the direct applicant tracking systems that they're doing.
Okay.
Okay, that's one thing. Then we can start doing advanced LinkedIn connections. So this is also a volume thing because LinkedIn will reward you for being connected.
Mm-hmm.
So the more connected you are, the more options you have for second degree connections.
Mm-hmm.
The goal of the LinkedIn campaign at first is to make as many second degree connections into first connections because then you can email them for free.
Mm-hmm.
This is important because LinkedIn Premium is $300 a year for a candidate, and they only give you 3 free in-mails per month.
Right, and
3
then
is
just for people who aren't familiar with InMails, that's actually the ability to, let's say that I want to actually contact the person at that company that you're now recruiting for, and I want to mail them personally. I only have three that I can do per month to actually pay LinkedIn, and then once I pay, I can only email 3 people within that company directly to say, hey, you may not have seen it, but here's that whatever. And I don't even know how effective that is when I do that. Do you have a sense?
3 in the world of recruiting is nothing.
Okay.
It's literally nothing.
Okay.
So when and this is my example in the book, is I had a candidate that had 34 connections when he came to me. I got him to 500 in a week, and he had 4 job interviews. I had
Wow.
optimized his profile, and I just went in and connected. And that changed how I use LinkedIn, because it taught me that once you're optimized, you can capture low-hanging fruit. You can also do a more directed search. So once you're connected, and that, like, for instance, right now, I think I just looked, I have 346,000 potential second degree connections.
Wow.
Okay. Wow. That's obviously overwhelming. There's no way. At this point, I've connected so well. I have so many first degree connections that I have this universe of second degree connections that I can reach out for. So what I would do then is I have the opportunity to narrow down. Maybe I only want to look for a job in Miami. Like, let's say I want to move from Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I'm looking for people that are doing podcasts and radio.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to look for the title podcast anywhere across the country.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to determine what are we looking for? Maybe it's a company, like one of my example candidates, he wanted to work for Google, and he used this method. He first got connected, so he opened up his universe of second connections. He just got connected with all sorts of people.
Right.
And then that opened up all of these Google second connections, and he started connecting like crazy with them. And he did get 2 in-person interviews with them.
Wow. Okay, got it. So there's a, hey, I hope someone can actually find me on LinkedIn. That's one strategy. The second strategy is then going, and I think I was tracking this, is me going in and saying, okay, I would like to work at Google, and what was he looking for? Or can you say, like, we can make up anything. Let's say he was wanted
Sales.
Okay, Google sales. So he wanted to get into Google sales. And so he started going on to try to get as many people that he could on LinkedIn and connected, because if I'm connected in first connection, I can reach how many I can reach someone on second connection by how?
There's under the advanced feature, which I teach, and it's better to look at this on video. LinkedIn's much easier on video to see me
but
doing
I can
it.
actually then I have the ability to connect with those second connections if
That's
I'm
right.
connected to them in the first place. Okay. So like let's say that I wanted to connect with my husband Gideon, who actually knows people at Google. Then if I would connect with him, then I would look at his connections of like 7 connections of people at Google, and I would be able, now that I'm connected to my husband Gideon, be able to connect with the second connections. Okay,
Boom.
Got it. Okay, so that's why you're
send
just
out the quick
constantly,
connect.
yes.
They may or may not accept, but most people are connection oriented on LinkedIn.
Right.
As long as you look professional, like I always say, no stalkers, no strippers, right?
Right.
You have to be professional,
Right.
or nobody's going to connect with you. Those ones connect with you. Of course, you're going to open up even more second degree connections once they do, because they're connected to other Google people. But let's say you connect, and let's say you connect with the director of sales. I mean, in this case, okay. What he can do now is what I call the third pass. So if he didn't capture low-hanging fruit, like if he sent his profile, which is like your electronic business card, The person connected. If the person didn't say right then, oh my gosh, you are exactly what I'm looking for, which is what happened with my e-commerce guy, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
my digital marketing guy. If that doesn't happen, he's now connected and he can email for free. So he's
Oh,
not paying for any premium. He can just say, you know what? I've been very interested in working for Google. I see you're the director of sales. I have a lot of sales experience. I'm passionate about the company. Would you consider networking with me?
right. Okay. And then that so you're saying, okay, networking of the past, which is like, do you know anyone? Like you're meeting someone for lunch and you're like, yeah, I'm trying to get a job in e-commerce. Do you know if anyone at Google? Like that may or may not happen. It may take forever to finally get to that person. But you're saying try to do all that stuff beforehand so that you're reaching your second connection or maybe direct connection and saying, hey, can we get together versus. But the conventional thinking on networking is that so CJ knows Gideon. Gideon then connects CJ to someone at Google who's a pretty high level person at Google. That's going to be a better networking because the person Gideon knows the person at Google who will feel more kinship and interested in talking to me versus this LinkedIn connection. Is that true? That's what I would
I
imagine.
I agree that what I call quarterbacking your resume, when
Yeah.
you have a first person connection, their only job, the only thing, there's two things they really have. Okay, I'll say two. There's two things they have influence over. One is quarterbacking your resume. Hey, this is CJ. She's interested in this job. Why don't you just take a look? And that bypasses the gatekeeper. It
Right.
gets around HR and it lets the person know, oh, someone I value on my team knows someone else and they're saying, hey,
Right.
take a look.
Right.
That's mostly where the job ends until they actually interview the person.
Right.
And then what happens is, and this is something that I deal with a lot in the book, is controlling the recruiter's natural proclivity to say no. Okay? Like in their head, they're like, no, no, no. Like the no button is going off and we want to switch it to yes.
Right.
Okay? So I help the candidate figure that out. But let's say so I'm going to give an example of my husband. My husband was an international project manager.
Right.
He applied for our transit system for a planner role.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't as high level. So he interviewed and they loved him. He was totally qualified. But in their head, they were like, he's an international project manager. He's going to leave us. He's not going to stay. He won't enjoy this role. Like this little no character is going crazy. That's where your quarterbacker comes back in because then Gideon can say, you know what? I talked to CJ. She is so excited. This is exactly what she wants to do. She wants to get off the road. She hates, this international project manager is always traveling. She loves it. She loved the organization. She loved you. Boom. That's it.
Okay. So the only benefit is kind of like basically bypassing the HR so you get it directly versus like going into the sea of this applicant tracking system. Who the heck knows what happens with that,
Yes.
right? So you bypass that. And then second, you can kind of quarterback any objections that happen that from the recruiter may have like, no, why would you want to do that? La, 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 la. You basically can have a direct connection. Okay. Got it.
Yes.
Interesting.
It's like the happy little voice on the shoulder, like, oh no, no, she loves it, while this other voice in their head is like, no, no way, she'll leave, she won't be happy. Oh yeah, she's fine. So that's where a personal connection is helpful. So advanced LinkedIn networking is a different type of networking.
Right.
It is. I'm not going to try and pretend it's the same as in person, but you can do volume in a way that you can't do with your personal network.
Right, but you want to approach it from two ends. One is like, hopefully someone will find me. And then the second is, now I'm going to go hunt you down, which is, I
That's
want to
right.
work at Google. I want to work in whatever these things. And I'm going to use my LinkedIn prowess to like find these people and make more direct networking hits versus kind of like having lunch with someone and hoping that they know someone who. Although I have to say the other networking thing, each time my clients do that, they find jobs. So I'm not sure if it's my clients, but something happens. So I'm not sure why that happens still, but it does.
I'm not against in-person networking.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that somebody has to have a very robust network for it to work. It doesn't work really well for time-based things. Like if you're about to run out of money in 3 months, it's
That's
something
true.
that's better for you to develop over time. And it also works in conjunction with what I teach, CJ, because if you have an optimized resume and that personal, your Gideon says, CJ is awesome for this and your resume is optimized for it, you're just helping Gideon out You're
Right.
helping him. But
Right.
if you didn't optimize, if he looked at it and was like, why am I even looking at this resume?
Right.
So what I teach applies to in-person networking as well.
Yeah, no, I'm not poo-pooing any
Yeah.
type of networking. I'm just saying I think both work, but frankly, the thing that you're mentioning is just way more logical and time efficient in my mind. It's like, gosh, I think a lot of my clients are going to be happy to go to you. And so, what do people do? So they can get your book.
Right.
They can go to your website, KarenGurney.com, KarenGurney.com.
GUR. Yeah.
Gurney. And then if they buy the book, they can actually get access to all your videos, right? You have a whole bunch of videos where you actually show people exactly what they need to do on LinkedIn and all those different things as well. I mean, there's tons and tons of videos that I haven't looked at, but I saw reference here, right? So if they get the book,
People,
they can
yeah,
get those
people who
videos.
buy the book, they have access to my $200 online class
Oh, they
for
do.
free.
Okay. And if they don't buy the book, then why wouldn't they just buy the book?
Honestly, the most cost-effective thing is for them to buy the book, and it's much less money for me because, as you know, producing a book, just the book itself costs money to
Yes.
produce.
Yeah. Okay. Or
Well,
they
the
can sign
online
up for your
class.
$200 class, whichever you want.
That's right. I decided to include it because, so here's one of the things, CJ, a lot of people listening are not making maybe, to survive as a coach, you know this, you have to start working with a certain amount of people that can spend a certain amount. But there's a million new grads out there that need this information. That's
Right.
why I wrote the book and have the class, because they can't necessarily afford a personal coach,
Right.
but they can learn the techniques and apply it in their own life. And there's other people who are just very self-driven. They
Right.
don't want to hire a coach.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, I talk to six-figure earners every day who don't want to hire me for this.
Right. Why
So,
not? But I get it.
um,
Like, if you want to go to Home Depot and build your shed, like, go, God bless. But
that's right.
if you have all the
Right.
time to learn and you have joy in learning, whatever. But if not, then go to go to your website and actually you can take a client and basically do all the things that you've talked about already. You can actually
Yes.
stack. Do they have to know some stuff beforehand? They need to know where they want to go. They need to get, or do you coach them through that whole process?
I talk them. Yes, we have a discovery session.
Okay, excellent. All right. Thank you so much. Can we have you on again? Because there's like 7 other things that we didn't even have a chance. Look at my questions. We only covered like two of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was
There's a lot,
fantastic.
and I know it can get overwhelming, but the biggest key is to know that there are these new tools out there. I mean, there's a new way, and like you said, if you haven't looked in 10 years, and these are high performance people
Yeah.
that grew up through organizations, have been working in corporate for years, and all of a sudden, downsizing, whatever, they find themselves in the market, and they're like, how would you ever? I mean, I can't even tell you how often a candidate says to me, how would you ever even know this?
You don't
Right.
until you have this book. I love it.
That's right.
Thank you so much. We've been talking to Karen Gurney. We've been talking to her about her book, Stacked: Double Your Job Interviews, Leverage Recruiters, and Unlock LinkedIn. Thank you so much. We're going to have you on again.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. Would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.